Um, Hi Vinesh, thanks for taking out the time to speak with me. Um, before we go into the details, can you tell our viewers a little bit about yourself and your legal background?
Yeah, so I didn't start out at all in legal world. I was a computer science major in undergrad.
Oh
So
wow,
I
okay.
started working as an engineer for the first 4 years of my career, and
Mm-hmm.
then decided to go to law school because I like working with people and with words, and I made the change, right? So I worked for a kind of a big tech firm called Wilson Sonsini for a couple of years,
Mm-hmm.
and did worked on like IPO work and different kinds of commercial contracts and legal issues faced by tech companies,
Right,
and then joined Google and was there for about almost 8 years.
right, right,
Recently left, but my kind of background has always been kind of an intersection of tech and law.
right, right, right. Oh, okay. That's awesome. So, are you aware of this Twitter handle called TrueIndology and what's been going on with it recently?
I follow that. I'm on Twitter regularly. He is someone I follow. I've seen his tweets from time to time. I have not followed him that long though. I know he was like an anonymous scholar and he would tweet about kind of the history of India and about Hinduism and different things. So I always found him to be a pretty cool resource, and that's part of the reasons I love Twitter. It's such an interesting place to find all kinds of viewpoints.
Right.
And I heard he was suspended recently, and I don't know kind of what's happened since then or the background there.
Yeah. So, for the benefit of the viewers, let's just try to sum up the facts here. So, TrueIndology, is this Twitter handle that engages people with discussions around Indian history. Oftentimes, he cites original primary resources to prove his point. So, as you can see before you, there's a snapshot of his Twitter handle. This is what the account looks like, and you can see how it says account suspended. So the purpose of this handle is to share historical information. It all started with a threat from this, Indian bureaucrat who wasn't happy with some of the stuff that True Indology was sharing. As you can see in front of you, he threatened True Indology by way of this tweet. There's a snapshot, and he's basically threatening him, and he's saying that he's going to reach out to. So IPS in India means Indian Police Service, and so he's a bureaucrat, and he's talking about how he's going to get his account suspended.
Hmm.
Now, as per True Indology, over the last 3 years since he's been on Twitter, there have been multiple calls by different people to sort of get his account blocked and get his account suspended. Even though he hasn't really threatened anyone, all he does is that he shares information that is different from the popular narrative. He basically calls out people on when they make a statement, he makes a contrary statement. That's about it. And he cites a primary source to, back up the statement that he's making.
Hmm.
So in this tweet, this is a Twitter handle called Being Weird. And he says, report him, guys. He's on the verge of being deleted. Keep reporting him. Feels like him shouldn't exist on social media. So, there's this entire sort of group of people who basically want to get rid of him. And recently, just like a month ago, what happened was that, as you can see before you, the snapshot. So there was this tweet shared by Kavita Krishnan, and she was talking about how, in southern Indian states, beef eating is a very sort of common thing. And she just, happened to share a tweet, and it's basically she was referring to how, beef was consumed in ancient India. Now to this tweet, True Indology responded by citing the statistics from the government of India. And the statistics basically said that only 25% of the people, in South India and these states consume beef. So he was basically taking a contrary stand to, what Kavita Krishnan was saying. And mind you, Kavita Krishnan is actually, she's a very well-known member of the Communist Party of India, and she's a well-known person in India. So now after this, looks like hell broke loose, So people, like a lot of people, like started sharing pictures of like dead cows and beef on his Twitter handle. Even though he's a self-proclaimed vegan, and he encourages people to be non-violent. And so they, according to him and a lot of others, like his Twitter handle was polluted with all these pictures. So
Mm.
finally, it's also kind of funny because I mean it's also so like it's so stupid, like when you see what has actually happened. And so finally he gives up and he's like, as you can see in the tweet before you, he says, "Let me say it again. All those cruel people like you who post gruesome dead pictures of innocent animals as though an achievement deserve to die a dog's death. I hope people like you get washed away in flood. Now ask your Kerala police to come and wash my feet." So this is the most sort of volatile statement that he made, like in the entire discourse, where he's basically saying that you guys deserve to die a dog's death, and you can get washed away in the flood. That's all he said. Other than that, he didn't really encourage anyone to like kill anyone or whatever. Okay. And so now what followed is mind-boggling, and it's just like it's fascinating because so Twitter basically, banned him for saying this. So Twitter said that this is extremism, bigotry, and targeted mental and religious harassment. All of this was sent to him on Twitter. And the
So
irony is that the mass reporting of his tweet in response to agonizing violation of his human rights as a Hindu and a vegan led Twitter to suspend his account without even a warning, to take the tweet down or follow the limit suspension. So basically, they didn't give him any warning, nothing. They just like deleted his account. Forget suspending. They just deleted his account. So all the tweets that he had, collected over the last 4 5 years are just gone away. And his followers were like confused. As you can see in before you, this is a snapshot of the message that Twitter sent TrueIndology, and the message basically says that he has violated, the rules of abusive behavior. So Vinesh, this is just like this is also. I mean, I don't know what to make of it because a part of me is like, how is this even possible? But then this is true at the same time. So I'm going to pick your brain a little bit to figure out like what is going on here. So since you worked with Google and you're familiar with the big law world, what exactly is going on here?
yeah, so let me get this straight. So it sounds like he corrected a very famous politician regarding kind of their statement about beef eating in India.
Right.
And then because he corrected her, he was basically harassed by hundreds of people showing him images of beef and of cow slaughter and various things.
Yeah.
And because he got upset about it, he was the one banned
Yeah.
for targeted religious harassment.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
That's
Wow.
fascinating.
That's crazy.
When I
So
hear it all in sequence, it's a fascinating turn of events because it's kind of ironic, right? You would think that he was the one being victimized and not the actual abuser here.
right, because you can still all these people who shared pictures of dead cows and stuff are still sort of enjoying their time on Twitter, and this
Right.
guy because he said that they deserve to die a dog's death, which I mean I don't know. It doesn't, at least in my legal experience, it doesn't seem like a statement that would incite like religious violence or anything like that. So
Right,
it
right.
doesn't seem to be that serious of a statement. It sort of falls within the general purview of freedom of speech.
Well,
And so, yeah, so he was banned for just saying that. So how does it work? Like, who's giving the orders here, Vinesh?
I mean, and it's funny because if anyone who spent like more than 10 minutes on Twitter, you
Right.
can find the most egregious, like just repugnant statements and all kinds of insults and all kinds of abuse on Twitter anywhere, right?
Yeah.
So
In
why did
fact,
he get abused and other people all
yeah.
just walk scot free?
I've even sort of had seen gruesome videos of people dying and bullets being shot, like videos that wouldn't even be allowed to put on like mainstream like YouTube or anything, and those videos are doing circles on Twitter sometimes. So I don't understand that why would they allow those videos but ban this poor guy because he said that people deserve to die a dog's death.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I think it boils down to politics, right? And that's where you got to
Right.
really study. You really have to understand the media landscape now.
Yeah.
People don't get information from CNN and Fox News and NDTV and other channels like they used to.
Right.
Now they get most of their information from the internet.
Right.
And that comes from a handful of sources. It comes from Facebook, from Google, from Twitter.
Right.
There's a few outlets out there that really dominate the social media landscape.
Right.
And so now, as with any place where information is shared, that becomes a very, a power center in some ways, right?
Right, right,
Because suddenly YouTube has more influence than CNN.
right, right.
And before, when you had a couple of networks running all of media,
Yeah,
it was very easy to control what they were saying because there was a handful of companies owning all of the media. Like I think in the U.S., I'm not sure how it is in India, but
yeah.
in the U.S., something like five companies own 90% of media in the U.S.
Right,
So
right,
it's very consolidated and very much under the control of a handful of individuals.
right,
And so suddenly you have social media turning that on its head.
right, right.
And so, a guy like TrueIndology, it's pretty fascinating. Here's someone who's totally anonymous,
Yeah,
who just happens to be a smart scholar and pretty
right,
savvy as far as current issues and what's going on. And all he was doing was sharing information that contravened various political narratives that are being pushed forth, right?
right, right,
So I'm born and raised in America, so I don't know the full political landscape in India, but I know, in the South, these communist and Marxist parties are pretty powerful, and
right,
they're quite anti-Hindu, from what I understand. They're very anti-Brahmin, very anti-Hindu. They just for a long time now, for decades, right?
right, right.
So when a guy like TrueIndology is completely like undercutting their narrative
Yeah,
on Twitter, that really hurts them politically because people are like, oh yeah, these guys are jokers, they're liars.
right.
So suddenly there's pressure on these companies by the political parties and political establishment
Uh-huh.
to quote do something about these guys who are causing them problems.
Right, right,
And so I was at Google for many years, and I would say tech companies they're not politically neutral. They're not like it's not like they're uninvested in politics and they have no stake in politics. They're very much political animals too, and
right,
especially as time has progressed, it wasn't always the case before, but as they've gotten bigger and more powerful,
right,
a handful of companies run all of technology. It's
right.
Amazon, it's Google, it's Facebook, it's Apple, it's Twitter. It's really a few companies that really dominate the tech landscape. And
Mhm.
so you see a lot of those people who run those companies very much intimately involved with the political establishment too. And so, like for example, with Google, hundreds of Google employees went to work for the Obama administration.
Right,
And many senior Obama officials came to work for Google afterwards, or
right,
Amazon or otherwise, right?
right, right,
So it is a very incestuous relationship between the two.
right,
And from what I understand, like that's not that different from in India too. Like in Twitter India, I'm sure the policy guys for Twitter
right,
are guys with connections to various political establishments in India.
right, right.
So they get pressured from these guys, and naturally, and they also tend to lean more liberal
Hmm.
in terms of their policies and their kind of politics as executives, right?
Yeah, but I mean that's understandable, like they leaning liberal or conservative because that's their political choice. But
Yeah,
what is fascinating here is that they're actually, banning someone, and sort of preventing someone's right to freedom of speech.
right,
So,
right.
so Vinesh, what is the solution?
Yeah. So, and this is actually a pretty widespread phenomenon. What happened with true Indology, the way you described it, it totally clicked with me because we've been seeing this happen in the U.S. as well.
Mm,
Tech companies have been systematically either banning or there's lots of ways they can suppress a subversive viewpoint, right? So,
right,
I think this really took off after the Trump election. Trump
right.
relied heavily on Facebook and YouTube and other means to kind of get his message out there because the mainstream media was 92% against him in terms of their coverage.
I see. Okay.
So social media was his only chance to get his message out there, right?
Right,
And so systematically, you've seen all of the kind of key supporters of Trump and kind of his viewpoint. Either they get banned or their recommendations, their videos won't get recommended in the algorithms anymore, or
right,
or they won't show up in rankings as much anymore, or they'll be shadow
right,
banned. There's a whole host of techniques to kind of suppress these viewpoints. And so what I see with TrueIndology is just more of the same.
right.
You have a subversive viewpoint that's
Mm-hmm.
contradicting a political narrative, and suddenly these tech companies take action regarding him, but not for someone else who's on their side, right?
Right.
So there is an evident political bias, and that's becoming clearer and clearer day by day. Like that
Mm-hmm.
wasn't the case maybe 5, 10 years ago, but now it's becoming very obvious. You see it on Facebook, you see it on YouTube and on Twitter in a major way. And so, the challenge here is that as far as solutions go, there are only a handful of companies now dominating the entire social media landscape, right? So some have suggested antitrust, right?
Yeah.
Saying that we shouldn't have companies controlling that much of the landscape. I mean, Google controls 90% of search.
Oh, wow.
Facebook controls, a similar percentage of social networking, right?
Right, right,
And it's dangerous because a guy like Mark Zuckerberg, he has a political agenda too. He has a political preference too, and he can very easily decide who stays and who goes, right?
right,
there's no constitution that governs Facebook. It's really his whim.
Right, right.
And that's why even his co-founder last week came out and said Facebook should be broken up.
Mm,
Because the danger here is that these big tech companies, what happens is they stay big by acquiring their competitors.
right,
So, you have Instagram coming up, and that was a pretty exciting platform. Suddenly, Facebook acquires it.
right,
You have WhatsApp come up, which is a very exciting platform, very, like global platform. It gets acquired by Facebook.
right, right.
So you have a situation where, platform diversity is nil. You have one company dominating every sector.
Right.
And that can lead to a lot of political kind of gamesmanship and corruption in ways that we don't want in a civil society. Especially, the problem now is that social media has become our town square, right?
Mhm.
In the olden days, people would go out to town and they would share pamphlets, they would share, publications, and they would talk with each other. That's how they would have civil discourse. And now that's gone online, right?
Right,
And that's how social media was sold to us in the first place. Was this is a place where we can have digital identities and digital citizenship and have like our voices heard online, right?
right, right.
But what does that mean when we're being, when subversive viewpoints are being banned and where, people who are decided to be dissidents are banned? It's very much like China then, right?
Mm,
Where you
right,
have no control and you have no ability to say something against the government and authorities, right? And especially anonymous speech. That was a key part of the American Revolution was being able to speak anonymously.
yeah.
A lot
Yeah,
of pamphlets.
I'm
Yeah,
sorry to like interject at this point, but one of the questions that a lot of viewers may have is that why is it that the establishment, like, so a lot of the content that TrueIndology shares actually helps the current establishment, like helps the current government in India.
yeah.
So what people don't understand is that how come, like someone who's not in power is able to have so much influence on Twitter, but the party that is actually in power is not able to do anything about it.
Yeah, no, that it's a very fair point, and I think it goes back to kind of the inherent alignments between the tech companies and the political structure that they align to. Um,
Right,
you know, Conservatism is very much like an endangered kind of species in Silicon Valley. So you could probably count on one hand the
right,
number of tech executives who lean conservative.
right,
There are very few. And
right,
by and large, they tend to, lean liberal and align themselves to liberal organizations who match their ideology and they work hand in hand.
right,
And I think it's similar in India as well
right,
because, you
right.
know, you could
And
argue Trump.
there also must be international pressures, right? Not just domestic pressure, but international pressure to kind of, hold and contain the narrative, because a
That's right.
deviation is also dangerous for big businesses in India. Because, for example, if people start taking pride in their ancient culture, ancient tradition, ancient food, then they perhaps, won't go to McDonald's as much as they do now, right? So,
Absolutely.
so I think that also makes the sense. That makes a lot of sense. But what just fascinates me is how does this like nexus work? Like how is this? How is there so much synergy between various stakeholders and they, attack the single guy who's, active on Twitter?
But it's not that far-fetched. It isn't a conspiracy theory because if you look at like if you go to Davos
Yeah.
and see who's attending Davos, the World Economic Forum,
Right.
it's all the key figures of the liberal establishment, be it political
Right.
and academic, and it's also the key figures of the tech establishment and corporate establishment.
Right.
They're all there having their kind of meeting and their confab. And Davos is one example of many like that,
Mm-hmm.
where they all get together. There's one happening in Paris right now,
Oh
and
wow.
and it's all about online extremism. And it's the same
Right.
people. They've gone to the same schools. They all went to Harvard or Oxford or it's they're Sorbonne in Paris. Like they're all going from the same backgrounds and same establishment, and they're part of the same global transnational network, right?
Right.
So it isn't that far-fetched to think that they actually do collaborate and work together because we know that. I mean, we know there's a revolving door between the White House and Google during the Obama administration.
Right.
And I'm sure there's examples in India too of people who are officials in the Congress Party, for example, maybe working for tech companies in India, right?
Right.
So it isn't like there's some like smoky dark room where they get together and make these decisions.
Yeah.
But in fact, when you look at the backgrounds of the general counsel of these tech companies or the key kind of executives of trust and safety or other departments of these organizations, they are very politically connected. They
Yeah.
all donate to the same candidates. They all kind of vacation in the same places, and they
Yeah.
all went to the same schools.
Oh wow.
So it's the same in India too. I'm sure St. Stephen's and other elite schools
Yeah.
represent a big part of the tech elite within India as well.
Right. Right. No, I agree. Wow. Well, thank you so much, Vinesh. This was like really, really helpful. And yeah, no, I mean it's pretty sad that such things are actually happening, and it's good that people are becoming more and more aware about how these big tech so-called oligarchy works, and it's not because the first impression you get when you see Facebook or Twitter is that, oh wow, these are like mediums to share information, to further your right to freedom of speech, but
Right.
you can only go so far, right? Like once you once you're crossing the limit, it seems like they're going to tighten their control over you. So thank
And
you.
that's how they started.
Yeah,
That's how they started off, right? That was the whole mess. Like Google's mission statement when it first started was to make information universally accessible.
right,
That's an amazing mission, and that's a mission that transformed the whole world.
right,
And that's the promise of the internet is to be able to see things and hear things that you wouldn't otherwise see, and to expand your mind and horizons you wouldn't otherwise, experience. And so this is such a critical issue because if we don't have this kind of freedoms of information online, we don't have it anywhere. So I
right,
think this is becoming an issue of civil rights.
right,
And until we think of it as such and people really stand up for their rights, we're going to see more of the same, which is extremely dangerous for civil discourse.
right, right. All right. Thanks, Vinesh. Thank you so much for your time. I'm going to digest this, think about this, and then get back to you for more questions in the future.
All right. Thank you, Ayush. It's great talking
Right.
as always.
Thank you.
All right.